Yeah, we're going to talk about Queen Victoria again, not exclusively about her rule, but about the time period. Yep. All right. So, 19th century society, urbanization, and intellectual movements. 1800 to 1914 is where we are going, you guys. We have covered some ground. What's going to happen in 1914? World War I. We are on the cusp, guys. Like, we should, if we stay on this pace with how amazing you've been doing, getting through material, have lots of time to stop and review. And I want that with you. I want to be able to create review games and to have review challenges and really, because there's some material that is going to feel very foreign from September. And so we want to make sure we get you there. And so I appreciate you guys keeping up over the break. So our theme for this discussion today, by 1900, much of Europe had become urban and industrial. Where did the Industrial Revolution, the first one, start? England. It spreads to the continent. After that, after about 1850, we're going to get the second latter part of 19th century. Yes, ma'am.
What was that question? We got confused on like what are they?
Oh, the agricultural revolution, the Netherlands.
Okay.
Think about like they already had all this money, so they had time to like figure out how to drain their land. Britain, they had all this cottage industry, had somewhere to put all those people. That's how it's done. And we said Netherlands, so agriculture. Okay, so by 1900, much of Europe had become urban and industrial. This is where we're moving. Like I said, it's going to kind of go fast, fact, and that's what we're going to be doing here. We've talked about a lot of revolutions so far: scientific revolution, French Revolution, agricultural revolution, first industrial revolution, glorious revolution, and we're going to keep on going. And so one of the things, and I want you to look, here's your essential question number 1 that is in your packet. One of the questions that you may see on an AP exam is, can you identify the differences and similarities of the first and second industrial revolution? You need to know these. In fact, you'll need to know them in just a little bit today. You need to know the difference. So we're getting to the last half of our 19th century, and let's just recap a little bit with our first industrial revolution. That had occurred between 1780 and 1850. Beginning again where? England, okay? So beginning in England, and it had focused around textiles. So you can see our textile mill up here. One of the reasons it starts in England is because that cottage system, the putting out system. And so textiles have been our first industrial revolution, the main source of income. Also coal. Remember we talked about coal and the steam engine and all of that in England. So that is going to be another product of the first industrial revolution. Iron, which we're going to see becoming replaced today by a better, more sturdy form of metal. I would much rather be in a steel building than an iron one any day of the week, even with the little chance of earthquake we have here, because I've seen what happens to iron with a little bit of force. Yes, ma'am?
I have a random question. What are textiles?
Textiles is like any kind of like yarn. It can be anything from the yarn to the fabric to the finished product, a shirt.
Okay.
Yep. And then here, as I said, the first industrial revolution is iron. So here, iron is an ore. It's a natural resource. And then the railroads, the steam engine, transportation. You need to be able to remember this slide. It's first industrial revolution. Textiles, coal, iron, and railroads. Okay, so if you were asked to compare and contrast on an FRQ between the first industrial revolution and the second, you need to know the difference. Yes, ma'am?
Okay, what were railroads made out of before steel?
Iron.
So everything was iron?
So everything was iron, and so everything had to be reliant on what iron could hold, so the steam engines could only be a certain size. So the cargo you were carrying could only be so heavy. The development of steel is going to allow us to start building up skyscrapers because it can hold that force. The only steel I have ever seen like completely devastated is when I visited the 9/11 exhibit, and the steel that had like twisted around itself from the impact of the plane. It's the only time I've ever seen steel that devastated in my life.
Still didn't break, did it?
What? It still didn't break, but it was very mangled. Yes, it was very. That was probably the thing that struck me the most, and that I remember the most, other than like the phone calls that they had recorded. So, second industrial revolution. Here are the pictures you would want to memorize here. So we still have railroads, but you can see a lot thicker This is steel. These are steel rails. Steel rails have become part of the second industrial revolution, so these are the four major aspects here. Again, we're in the last half of the 19th century, 1850 on. Okay? 1850 on. We stopped at 1850 with our last lecture on the first industrial revolution. You're going to get larger structures, so look how big the machines. Okay? Larger structures, and I'm not just talking machines. We're also going to see down here, this guy's hanging out, helping with this skyscraper. I was going to use that picture, you know, where they're all sitting there for lunch, but that one, everyone has seen that one. This is kind of a different angle, and I just think, like, you could not pay me enough money to do that job, to be that high and, like, with no thank you. Skyscrapers. So he's out on the beam here and see the city below, all of the, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah,
you sneeze
yeah,
too
this is
hard,
all.
you're going down.
What?
Like if you sneeze too hard, you're going down.
Yeah, yeah. Ooh, bad, just a bad moment and you're done. Yes, ma'am.
I was watching a documentary about them rebuilding a new World Trade Center, and there was these two guys that were like at the very top of the building, and they were the ones that were maneuvering the steel beams into place, and nobody else was allowed up there until after they soldered everything into place.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Nope, not enough money. Just I was even like quoted in a book when I was a little kid. I was not little, I guess I was 15. That's not little. But quoted like, "Are you afraid of heights?" And what did I say? I said, "No, I'm not afraid of heights. I'm afraid of falling off of heights," like all sarcastic teenager style. And they put it in the book, and I was like, "Why? Why didn't wasn't your parents there to like say don't quote that lives forever?" Anyway, so large structures, and then of course heavy machinery, and so we're going to see even larger factories, even faster production, okay, going on here. Part that makes this possible is the Bessemer process. The Bessemer process is the process by which you make steel. Now, I am not a scientist and I am not a physicist, and I'm not like a psychologist, although I do have a minor in psychology. So some of these things that we go through today, I'm going to be like, that's just all you need to know about it. Like, you are not going to have to explain the mechanics of the Bessemer process on the AP Euro exam. If you are taking AP Physics or something and you have to do that, that is that teacher's responsibility. So do not rely, like here's my disclaimer, do not rely on me later in life if someone asks you to like work in a factory and complete this task. Do not say my AP Euro teacher said this is how it works and you blow up the factory. I am just giving you the best information, the best information I can. So the Bessemer process is created and results in high quality steel. So this is where we get iron versus steel. So this is the process at which you're going to make steel. Iron, brittle, not as strong. Although it had been, you know, our best metal up to that point. Also very, you know, it couldn't take a lot of shock absorption. It just wasn't the best thing. If we're getting bigger and better, you're not building with iron. And so this process, there have been processes before, like I think the Scottish are making really excellent steel swords, going from iron swords, but it's very expensive. So what do people get famous for? Gutenberg didn't invent the printing press. He put together a bunch of other people's ideas. He made it affordable to buy a printing press. Bessemer makes it affordable to make steel. Mass-producing steel. He makes it affordable. Okay. At this time, we're also going to get oil. We're going to get kerosene for lighting. And we also get the internal combustion engine, which is the engine still used today in cars. We are also going to get electricity, and so we're going to see increasingly powered cities. So, I mean, if you think about it, all of the stuff I get to talk about today is kind of modern. Like, I shouldn't have, you know, we don't have to stop and talk about what is electricity, you know? Yes?
Did you know that there are whales alive today that were born before Moby Dick was published, and that just a few years ago they had one that washed up with an 1840s whale and harpoon embedded in its side?
Yeah, they live a long time. So, yes, maybe whales swimming out there who predate all of our second semester materials. So, chemicals. We're also going to see the use of chemicals, pharmaceuticals. Germany, we haven't talked about really taking the lead in agriculture or industrial up until now. And so this is important. Germany is starting to unify economically. And what are they going to start to put that economy into? Now remember, they're not, into technology. Now, they aren't unified yet politically. Okay, but we're still economically unified like we talked about, and they are going to start to use this for new technology. They won't be politically unified till 1870s, and then oh crap, watch out, quick slide into 1914. Yes. We're going to see like a lot of entities coming into play. But yes, we're going to have the nationalism kind of take over. There's also going to be outside forces. Remember when we're talking about the revolutions of 1848, Austria, Prussia. We're going to have some problems with some Habsburgs that have been hanging on there. So pharmaceuticals also, especially fertilizers and explosives, we're going to see. This expansion of industrialism, this expansion of industry and technology is going to create a demand for something that we hadn't had a demand for really yet, and that's experts with specialized knowledge. We're going to see science and technology becoming closely linked. Okay, so scientists and people creating technology start to work together, and they're experts in their field. We're going to start to see the development of new professions: engineers, architects, chemists, accountants, accounting, to keep track of all of the money. Like, you have to have employees now. Businesses are getting bigger. This is stuff people didn't worry about before. You're like, oh, I have one guy working for me. I need to pay him every week. I mean, so now you have like 20 people and then 100 people. And so accounting, surveying, plotting out land, city surveying, city building. We're going to get into all of that today.
City management.
Yes, city management. We're going to also, that's a good segue in, management of large public and private institutions also emerges as a profession. Before this time, like, you were just the boss of yourself. Like, you worked in your little cottage industry, or you were a farmer. And now we're going to have people who are going to have people working for them. And so management becomes a job at this time.
And then like middle managers.
And then middle managers. Yep,
Like
we're
the
going to
hierarchy.
we're going to hit all of that today, the different levels of workers, skilled, unskilled, and to different levels of middle class. And so I'm going to talk about Germany again. Why? Because Germany is going to lead the way in the 1890s. Andrew Carnegie, and he said it almost this way, this is just my funny way to remember it, said, pioneering, don't pay. The British have been the pioneers in the Industrial Revolution. What do you do with all of the capital, all of the things you spent all of this money on, when it's not the new thing anymore? Okay? It doesn't always pay to pioneer. They had set the way, but Germany's going to catch up very quickly, and they are going to overtake Britain in the Second Industrial Revolution. They are going to surpass them because Britain had given huge investments to technology early on, meaning it was more difficult for them to shift to the Second Industrial Revolution. Do you know why our school has all of the same computers it has had for so long? We were ahead of almost every school in Missouri in getting computers at that time. We spent a lot of money on them. How much would we lose, and would it take away to then go and get all Mac computers for this whole school? Okay? If you were the pioneers in something, it usually doesn't pay off in the end because somebody finds a cheaper way, a better grant, something behind you. They learn from you, and they catch up with you. And so Germany is going to become the most powerful industrial economy. Germany came into industrialization later and was able to utilize state-of-the-art technology. Germany will thus lead Europe in production of organic chemicals and power generators. Okay, so here's Germany starting to shine. They're not together yet, but we saw in the revolutions of 1848 that they want to be, that they're starting to use nationalism, and we're better than you. And look, we just proved we are better than you. Okay, so nationalism is going to be rearing its ugly head. What else happens with industrialism? Industrialism will continue to attract huge numbers of workers to the cities. Okay, this is where we're having everybody move out of the countryside into the cities. Industrialism will cause huge urbanization. This urbanization is only countered by what's going on now in China. Like, that is probably that will probably overtake this urbanization, is what's going on with rural peoples in China. I do really think that it will take over. Only time will tell. Okay, and so urbanization huge at this time. By 1900, over half of industrial workers in Britain, Germany, and Belgium worked for companies with more than 20 workers. And so urbanization is our population shift from 1701 to 1911. Britain, again, although Germany is going to be beating them in the second industrial revolution, they are going to lead this urbanization charge. And they are going to have over 50% of their population in 1891 living in urban areas. London will be by far the largest city in Europe at this time. And the other cities are going to begin to follow. And that is because population of Europe will increase by 50% between 1870 and 1940 or 1914. This is a huge growth. Yes.
Was this like the immigration thing, or like, you know, like when countries are more prosperous, they have more money, more food, so more kids? Or
Yes.
is it both?
This is in Europe. This is going to be due to more money, more food, children living longer. In Americas, as we're going to see, from South and Eastern Europe, it is going to be from immigration. But in Europe right now, this is due to better nutrition, better medicine, you know, having kids that live longer, all of these things. By 1900, you can read all of this. 9 European cities have populations over 1 million. Significant decline in mortality rates, especially among children. Birth rates actually fell during the period, however. So, how does your population grow this much if your birth rates are actually declining? People are living longer. Population is up, birth is down. Longer lifespan, better medicine, better sanitation. We're going to see that for sure. Better housing. More than 3 of your children are surviving, so things are getting, you know, much better.
The 1880s and 1890s in London had the highest historical reported records of abortion. Today's amounts are nothing compared to what it was.
We're going to see the rise of the middle class and having a little bit more flexible income, although we won't be looking as much at abortion because we're going to see the illegitimacy falls quite a bit as well. And so we will talk about that today. And so that's going to bring us into, well, you're living longer. How are you living? Oh, there's just my slide on urbanization. You can see pre-second industrial revolution, post, okay, and the influx there of those are, you know, peoples. So, poor living conditions during the first half of the 19th century. We've already talked about this. The first half, they're bad. We've talked about what will happen. Humanitarianism. It will get better. So, why do we have poor living conditions? What's going on? There are parks and open spaces were almost non-existent, okay? Like you didn't have this time and this money to create these places to go and to be outside. And so we all know that getting sunshine, that getting fresh air is important to your
Yeah,
health.
so why did they take away recess?
Why do they take away recess?
Yeah, don't we still need fresh air?
I do believe that we do still need fresh air and sunshine. At least you guys can believe.
Feel
I mean,
what?
I don't know. That's okay. If you think about it, school is set up
Like prison?
not like prison, like the factory. It's still based on a factory or agricultural model. You were only allowed to work so many hours up to what, age 9, right? That we studied the Industrial Revolution, and after that you went to full-grown adult days. What they do to you about the time? Took away recess, snack time, nap time, because you're set on that industrial model. You're getting ready. You need to be tough. You need to be ready to pull that whole shift. The school system hasn't changed very much. What do you still have summer off?
Because you have to sit back.
Yeah, because you would leave your cottage industry or factory job and you go back and help your family harvest. Yeah. Okay, so while we may be leaps and bounds ahead of what you might have been put through in school, I mean, it was just when I was in school that they just called your parents and said, we're going to need to, like, whoop her for about an hour. Is that okay with you? I mean, like, they would paddle you if you, it depended on what you did. I wouldn't know because I only got my recess taken away once in kindergarten, and it's for a really stupid reason, and that's the only time I ever got in trouble for school. You know those little, like, where you're learning to write your letters? Well, I already knew, like, how to, like, write and read. My parents were very active in that when I was a kid, and so I already knew how to do all this, and I've been in preschool, and so I get to kindergarten. I'm born in September, so I had to wait a year because of my birthday. So I get there. I already knew this, and so my mom, of course, get you new crowns for kindergarten, and I'm, of course, going to grow up to be a teacher, and so I have, like, a love for office supplies, and I didn't want to use all of my crown, and I already knew my letter A, and so, I was supposed to trace over the whole letter, not, like, I only went between the dashes, to save my crown because I already knew my letters, and she told me to stop it twice, and I told her she'd buy me a new box of crowns and I would use them on that, and she took away my recess. It was the most horrible. I had to sit with all the bad kids, like that kid that eats glue in the corner. It was horrible. And I never broke the rules again. So, where did I leave off before? Okay, the establishment is the factory. That's why we don't get recess. So, you know, if we can, I try to keep telling them we're training more business people than we are factory workers, but we'll see how it changes.
I mean, I guess business people don't need sunlight. They're in their office all day.
Yeah, but you know, they kind of take their lunch when they want, and they're encouraged to get up and take a break. You know, like, use more freedom. All right, so what else did I say? Oh, people are living in overcrowded attics and cellars, as many 10 people per room. Here's where we get the really nasty part too. Okay, guys, we're gonna get open drains and sewers. Okay, meaning these cities built up so fast that first of all, like, all of the sunlight and the wind is blocked. Okay, so buildings are tall and you're all crowded and in the streets. Second of all, you have all of the drainage coming into the streets. What I'm in, like, that's feces, that's like human waste. It's sitting in the streets. And so it rains and it gets into the puddles and the carriage goes by and it splashes you and you're covered in human waste and it's on your shoes and you go into your crowded room and you've tracked it into your home. And when it rains, it washes it off into rivers, into drinking water. Okay? It has been by that, but now we have how many more people living in cities? Yeah, it's just worse. We have more people exposed to it. And so what's going to happen is we are going to have disease, okay? And this disease is going to be called king cholera, okay? Cholera is a very nasty, fastly transported disease caused by feces in your drinking water, animal or human. Thank you. And so what happens is the cities that were built around are still middle-aged cities. And so you can't get even any wind or sun in to dry the streets because everything is so crowded and narrow and wet and it's not drying and it seeps into the drinking water and you get cholera and it spreads extremely quickly. Okay, so here's just some examples of the streets here. You can see with the buildings and the house, and people usually be even in like cellars and attics living in the wet moistness of the street. This is even a little bit wider of a street than most common. It was really hard to find one of the open sewers at this time. I found some in Iraq like today, but not like from this time period now. And so cholera became a greatly feared disease caused by contaminated water. It could spread with speed and devastating consequences. In Britain, which is going to urbanize more quickly than others. In 1831 to 32 we'll have an outbreak, 1848 to 1849, 1854 and 1867, and as I said, the cause was simple. Sewage was coming into contact with drinking water. If you would like to know what cholera does to you, pretty much, it can not always kill you, but at this time period generally would. It prevents your body from absorbing any liquid. And it doesn't matter as much as you're drinking, you are like dehydrated. It's very, very, like bad disease. And it spreads very quickly because, of course, once it's in drinking water, it was hard to trace and people didn't know for a long time where it came. At this time, they still think that disease is caused by odor. So it's like if you think about how they thought, so something smelled bad, like the poo in the streets that made your drinking water bad, that's how you got sick, and so they thought it was by you smelling it. We're going to learn that that's not what it is, and you should probably wash your hands and make sure that you boiled your water and all of that. But at this time, they don't know, and it spreads very quickly. Here's just some political cartoons from the time of King Cholera. He's always kind of pictured as death with the crown on. His belt right here, you can't really see, says cholera. And he's like riding into England, the water supply. Here he is pumping the water for all of the children at one of the public pumps that would have been off the street there. And so cholera becomes a really big issue. But what happens anytime we have these really devastating things for human beings? We're going to blame somebody, but we're also going to try to fix it. Find out what's, I want to know why all these people are dying. And so we're going to get the public health movement. Like, maybe we shouldn't have to live in our own feces and with 10 other people in a room and all of these things, okay? And so we're going to have the public health movement. In its push due to the disease of cholera, it really brings this public health movement to the forefront. We get a gentleman named Edwin Chadwick, and he will become the most important
Is he
reformer.
British? That's the most British name I've
Yes,
heard.
he is British. He becomes the most important reformer of living conditions in cities. He is influenced by, remember Mr. Crazy Mummy Guy, who had his body preserved for all of eternity except for a wax head, and his real head is mummified somewhere else in the museum, and he sits in his favorite chair, Mr. Utilitarian Jeremy Bentham. Yeah, so he is very much, Mr. Chadwick, influenced by Jeremy Bentham, that I've talked to you about before, the mummy guy, as I like to call him, and his idea of the greatest good for the greatest number. And so what Edwin Chadwick is going to say with using utilitarianism is that the greatest number of people can only be helped if you improve the sanitary conditions of the city. Who is it helping if you don't? Not nearly as many as it will help if you do. What's utilitarian decide that laws should be passed on? Whether it helps the good of the people. And so he's going to use Bentham's to try to get these through. He is also going to say that disease and death were the primary causes of poverty. If you think about it, most people that end up in serious poverty, like that are first generation serious poverty, are because they got seriously ill or because they have a disability or they can't work. And so, he's not quite off the mark there. He's going to say if we come in and help and we improve sanitary conditions, things will get better. So speaking of sanitary conditions, he gives us the sanitary idea, because they always come up with really, really original names for things. And this is the most important of his ideas. He believed that disease could be prevented by cleaning up the urban environment. Granted, for as far as we've come as human beings in this class, this was revolutionary at this time period. It would be a good idea to clean. Yes. Okay? I mean, that was like this was landmark. If he had been born a little bit earlier, if he had had exposure to work a little bit earlier, the American Civil War is already going on. Okay? It's already gone on. Do you know how many people lost their lives? Do you know what the #1 killer was during the Civil War? Infections. It was not the bullet that shot you, it was the doctor who amputated your leg. Because they would go over and, I'm going to amputate your arm in this bed, and then I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to wipe my knife off, and I'm going to amputate your arm, and I'm going to wipe the knife off, and I'm going to amputate your arm. And I have spread bacteria from wherever the heck you were laying for how many days on the battlefield from every single one of you people, because I do not know, even though I'm one of the most well-educated professions at the time, that I am spreading germs that way, because you smell things to get sick. Okay? So if he had lived a little, countless lives in the Civil War would have been saved. What?
That's so crazy.
I know, isn't it crazy? Just like one little thing. And he's also going to say, he's going to impose that we pipe in water and would carry off the excrement of communal outhouses. So piping in water. You guys, we take for a benefit that we have running water. My grandparents didn't have running water in the rural part of the United States growing up. And so piping out water to get rid of excrement, and he makes it so it's possible that it costs only 1/20th of the cost of action. You have people before that would have come out with shovels. Okay, so this actually costs way less, and so it's also going to create jobs, but in different ways. Yes?
That's kind of funny because my dad pays a separate thing, like a petroleum company, but that's where we get our drinking water from. You don't drink the house water because you're not sure how clean it is.
Yeah, I mean, there's different things. I mean, every city has its own different water requirements, and it's kind of up to your personal philosophy. I know a lot of people who do that. Just a side note about water. Does anybody know what country in the world, since we're talking about us being so privileged, is really, really worried about cholera right now?
India.
Ethiopia.
Nigeria.
Really big natural disaster recently. Haiti. Okay? Haiti is having a really hard time because of the waste and everything through the destruction of the natural disaster of cholera right now. And so it's just a good reminder that we complain about a lot of first world problems. There are people still having third world problems. Okay? So,
Haiti had that first world problem.
Was it last year or the year before that?
I think the year before.
The year before what happened?
Not last year.
Oh, that
So
was
was
nice. Haiti was like.
Wait, really? Why does it
I was
seem like
like
people are still talking about that?
2011.
Well, because the recovery is still really, really.
I
Jack in Japan earthquake in 2000. I just came back to the university that last year.
I feel like that happened like our sophomore year.
But, okay, so continuing on, where was I? Okay, Britain, as I said, is going to be the first to pass public health laws. Usually we talk about when France sneezes. Well, when Britain cleans up the sneeze, everyone else follows. Britain's going to lead in sanitary conditions, and it will spread to the rest of Europe. And by the 1860s and 1870s, many European cities will have made significant progress in public sanitation. We're getting closer to the 20th century, guys. So that's going to lead us into urban planning. Now that you figured that you need to clean your cities up, now you think maybe I need to plan them a little bit more and provide public transportation so people don't have to live like so close to work. If we don't make them live right next to the factory they're working in, they're going to live in a healthier area, get some sunshine, get some sunlight. Our cities won't be so crowded. There won't be as much waste if we plan out where people live. Like there wasn't zoning at this time. Like you guys know what zoning is?
Yeah.
So like you can have a house here, or you exactly cannot have a house here, you could have a Walmart here. There wasn't zoning to say you couldn't have this factory and then a little cottage and then a factory and then
There's some cities like that don't have zoning. That's
Yeah.
why the district don't do it.
yeah.
I want to say it's like some city in Texas, and like you can literally live like have a roller coaster go over your house every day because they don't have zoning laws.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And I think in Texas what that became was a rights thing about
Oh, like having an airport like
Yeah.
in your backyard.
Yeah, like
So-
if you want to build your house, you can. Nobody can tell you what you can or can't build and where you can or cannot build it.
Which
This
is-
guy has a house made out of beer cans. Like on a regular.
what people do with their freedoms. You can build your house out of anything. I am going to build it out of beer cans. So, we talked about Germany. Germany taking the lead in the Second Industrial Revolution. England takes the lead in sanitation. We're going to see France, not to be left out, take the lead on urban planning and public transportation during the reign of Napoleon III. Remember Mr. Napoleon, the nephew of Napoleon Bonaparte? Who is not Bonaparte, he's the nephew. No Bonaparte shall rule France again. He rules from 1848 to 1870, and he's going to take the lead by hiring or putting in charge a gentleman named George von Haussmann. I think they call him Baron von Haussmann. And he is set in charge of redeveloping Paris. And he is going to start to make wide boulevards. I've been to France. I mean, well, the wide boulevards and the way the city is set in France is one of the most beautiful things you'll notice when you get out. Like they're set on more of a triangle than they are on a square grid. The boulevards are very, very massive and large and beautiful. And so he is going to be put in charge of this. Can you think of another reason other than a well-planned city that French would like wide boulevards?
No barricades.
No barricades. You try to build a barricade on that sans culottes. Yeah, no barricades. That's what. Yeah, they're like, yeah, you try to do that. So they create wide boulevards, but also to keep this waste, to keep things healthy in the city, to keep that out.
So when they first started doing it with Molotov cocktails, was that close to World War I?
Closer to World War I. We're not going to see it so much in the streets now. Things are going to calm down here for us. This is going to be like our long 19th century. We're going to calm down, but then we're going to head back to with the Crimean War next time we talk, or next unit. What else was I going to say here? We get better middle class housing, moving to the outskirts, so AKA suburbs. That becomes the better style life. Demolition of slums. They're kicking people out of these slums. So it's not like, hey, we're demolishing them for your good. They're kicking them out to make the streets wider. But we do get the demolishment of some very, very bad places to live. We're also going to see the creation of parks and open spaces. So that becomes an important part of city planning. KA, New York City, one of the first things that they want to plan for that is Central Park. So it becomes very important. They're like, ooh, maybe it's not so good for you to stay in all of this smog and dirt and ick and no sun and air. So we get these. We're going to get some aqueducts too to bring in fresh water. So all of these things being answered.
And it's to suburbia. Like,
We're going to start to see the movement to the suburbs. Yes. We're going to see the new system of aqueducts, doubled fresh water. We're going to begin to modernize. And that's going to lead us into mass transportation. But before we go, some of you have been to France, some of you not, to Paris. You can just see how wide, like compared to those pictures that someone here's a little more old-fashioned, but how wide? I mean, like try building a barricade on that. Instead of like there the people, the wide streets. So, yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Some of those French, you gave them long enough. I don't know. So mass transportation by the 1890s, because of electricity, which was one of the 4 factors of the Second Industrial Revolution, you get the streetcar, and it will revolutionize city transportation. This, like great prediction, Randy, we are going to see that this is going to allow people to live further and further from where they work. This is important, because when you think of like the dream, it's like to live in the suburb with the little, you know, this is where we get kind of those, yeah, white picket fence, little dreams of living away, because before you've been all cramped in the city. So people can now travel into work. We're going to see the creation of London's subway system and then Paris's metro in the 1900s, in 1900 exactly, I should say. And by 1900 then, only 9% of Britain's urban population was overcrowded. So you remember the large number we had before with like 10 people per room. Now we have like 2 people per room. So like things are starting to improve because you don't have to live in that city to work in the city, to keep your job. People can spread out. Just a little side note, the San Francisco cars are different. They do not like run, they run like on an actual rail. Yeah, like on a...
They have one in,
New Orleans too.
Let's just go wherever. Like,
Does this go? No, only where, see the, I have some better pictures, only where the wire is.
okay, but they're not on tracks.
Not until later. Some of them will be for major intersections, but they're gonna have, they're gonna have like the wire and kind of go along with that. And they're able to like turn and pivot and like change direction, but all electrically operated.
It just seems a little
What? No.
Isn't this term gentrification?
What?
Gentrification more like whiteification?
Like when, like the rich move out towards the country and then slums are left in the middle.
Remember, there's a psychological effect. Or and then there's the opposite of that, when some population starts to seep out into the suburbs and the suburbs become very panicked about
I think that's what's happening
Yeah.
in Rio de Janeiro right now. They have like these like favelas, which is basically a ghetto, and like you can see them from the big city and such.
Yeah.
They have a big problem.
Like in the 1950s, 60s here, there was that big push of the new middle class to move out, and it like caused this whole disruption because the people in the suburbs fled towards the city. It was totally like racially spurred, and it was so silly. But it was just, I mean, it was just, we've seen it happen multiple times. So, let's see. So electric streetcar. So you guys are always awesome because you already preview or guess things before we get there. So we'd had Brandy again, great on the prediction here with immigration and migration. So we're going to see significant migration to cities from the countryside, of course, to continue. Even though we're going to have the suburbs, you're still going to have people coming to look for work. Although migrants often maintained a connection to the rural areas. And so still keeping those family ties there. We're going to see huge numbers at this time of Southern and Eastern Europeans migrating to America's largest cities after 1880 in search of economic opportunity. Why? Because as we're going to get to see, there is all kinds of crazy stuff going on in Southern and Eastern Europe that we're getting ready to move towards. So they are trying to flee this, especially Russia, Italy, especially the Jews. So this is why you see a big influx. They say there's influx eras on the United States. The 80s, 1880s I should say, is going to be from Southern and Eastern Europe. We're also going to see Canada and Latin America. That's not LA, that's Latin America. Will be also major destinations. I think another student told me, what's the difference? LA, Latin America. I'm like later LA will become, right now Latin America. Jews in Eastern Europe fled the persecution of the pogroms, and in some areas, agricultural challenges forced people to search for other opportunities. And so we're, like we saw the Irish potato famine is going to cause an influx of migration. So all of those things that make us the great, melting pot that we are. Well, I kind of want to evacuate as well. So, social structure is a result of the Industrial Revolution and urbanization. We're going to see, and this is the part, students are really into it or they're really not. This is the part we're going to get into, what's love at the time, what's the age of marriage? How are children doing? How are they raising their children? Are they still beating them? Or they think it's bad to beat them now? That's where we're kind of getting into this part. So social structure is a result of the Industrial Revolution and urbanization. We saw the first half of the 19th century, living conditions bad. Second part of the Industrial Revolution, things are going to get better. Although the gap between the wealthy and the working class is still going to be very significant, this period will become the golden age of the middle class, or the bourgeoisie. Okay? In Britain, wages and consumption will increase 50% between 1820 and 1850. You got more money, you can spend it on more cool stuff. Okay? You're not needing all of it just to sustain. We're going to see the expansion of industry and technology create a growing demand for experts. This is a review from earlier. This whole section here, when I talked to you about the new jobs in the middle class, I'm just bringing you back full circle. We talked about, engineers, accountants, management, managerial positions, all of these. That's just a review. We're going to see also the expanded and diversified the lower middle classes, or working class. We're going to see the divisions, or as I think Maddie predicted earlier, there's going to be some layers or different levels. Maddie or Brittany came from over here, somewhere over there. So, the industrial and urban development made society more diverse and less unified. And let's see, this is taking a little bit longer than I thought it was going to be. I'll get you through this, and then we'll stop so you can have some time to work today. Diversity within the middle class or bourgeoisie was kind of heterogeneous, okay? We're going to see about 15 to 20% in Western Europe are middle class. Less in Eastern Europe. Remember, Russia didn't even have a middle class before this, but now they have about a whopping 2% middle class at this time. Nobles dominate business. Now there's going to be like these little slots you fit into. Remember, you just were a village worker before? I mean, like, there's going to be like you fit into a slot in society now. You're going to be differentiated. You're going to be differentiated into 3 different levels here. The upper middle class, which are our bankers, industrial leaders, large-scale commerce, top government officials. Usually you can tell who they are because they're able to employ several servants. Like, they don't just got one, they got several. Like, one to cook for them, one to clean for them, maybe one to, like, drive for them. Yeah, and one to take care of the kids. So they have multiple servants. Like, these are live-in domestic servants. Okay, so people will be getting paid for this. And then remember, domestic work was one of the larger incomes, especially for our unskilled workers, which we're going to get to. You have your diversified middle class, which are smaller businessmen, professionals, merchants, doctors, lawyers, civil servants, and they employed at least one servant. So generally they'd have just one, like you just have a cook, or you just have a maid, or you just have a nanny. Again, live-in domestic servant. Then you have your lower middle class, or our petit bourgeoisie. I'm going faster because we've talked about all of these things before, but we're just talking about them again as they apply to the latter 19th century. These are our small or lower middle class. They're independent shopkeepers and small merchants, store managers, minor civil servants, yay for me, teachers, clerks, and some master craftsmen such as goldsmiths. They grew from about 7% of the population to about 20% in 1900. And women will begin working as department store clerks, stenographers, secretaries, waitresses, and nurses. Stenographers, if you ever, like steno notebooks, if you ever had, like the ones that flip over, people like used to get paid to like walk around, write down whatever this guy had to say, like her boss. And they call it shorthand sometimes, like there's certain symbols you would use. A court reporter is kind of the closest thing we have to that now. But doctor's shorthand would have been used.
Just
like you'd be like, take a memo, okay. And you write down everything you said, and then you type in the letter to somebody.
Evolve with like secretary.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. And that became a new job, a new lower middle class. So we have great diversity within the middle class. And they're unified really by most of these jobs work with your mind, not with your hands. So for these 3 categories, put work with your mind, not with your hands. That's an easy way to remember the difference. Okay, most of these jobs you're using your brain. Like a teacher, I'm on this list. Fortunately, I wish I was a little bit higher up on the list, but I'm in that lower middle class, and that you're using all of your, not many of these jobs are going to be laboring or with your hands. For our next grouping, when we get down to the working class, we're going to see that those are going to be labors with your hands. Number 3 down there. those are going to be working with your hands. But I want to stop here for today. It took us a little bit longer, but you guys had some really good questions, and I'll just kind of extend our next discussion. So before you go anywhere,